He stole my designs, my promotion, and my career, so I hacked the entire system and made sure his name was synonymous with failure. They say architecture is frozen poetry, buildings as symbols of legacy. I used to believe that. Until I learned how easy it is to steal a poem and sign your name at the bottom. 3 years ago, I walked into the towering lobby of Kessler & Day, portfolio clutched in one hand, an overstuffed backpack slung over my shoulder. Fresh graduate, top of my class, all the hunger of ambition and none of the cynicism that real experience brings. The firm was one of those glass-and-chrome beasts you see in design magazines, all exposed beams, minimalist furniture, and echoing silence that made you feel like an intruder for coughing too loud. I was their youngest hire in a decade. They let me know that, gently, every time I made a suggestion too bold, or stayed too late without being told. Then there was Daniel Havers. The first time I met him, he complimented my shoes. Stylish, he said, eyes flicking down to my weather-beaten boots. Don't see many interns rocking worksite gear on day one. I chuckled, awkward. They're just comfortable. He leaned in slightly, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. They'll love that. Makes you look hungry. Just, careful not to look desperate. That was Daniel. Effortless charm, cut with just enough condescension to keep you unsure whether you'd been complimented or warned. He was everything I wasn't, tall, sculpted, impossibly self-assured. The kind of guy who never seemed to sweat, who treated deadlines as guidelines and yet always had something brilliant to present. The partners loved him. The junior staff whispered about him like he was a legend in the making. But it was more than that. He had a gravitational pull, the kind that made you lean in when he talked, even when he was saying absolutely nothing. When Daniel walked into a room, people straightened their backs. When I walked in, they asked if someone had ordered lunch. We were both placed on the Kodo project, a competition pitch for a Japanese eco-resort designed to blend modern sustainability with traditional Zen principles. It was the kind of assignment you only get once in a career. And somehow, I was the lucky junior placed on the team with Daniel as lead presenter. At first, I was starstruck. Working with him felt like validation, like maybe I'd made it into the club. We even grabbed coffee once or twice. He asked about my thesis project, nodded thoughtfully, said he liked the idea of using light as structure. I thought he got it. I thought he got me. I should have known better. From day one, he was more interested in steering, vision, than touching actual CAD software. I didn't mind, I loved the design grind. Spent nights sketching elevation concepts, calculating shade angles, obsessing over the acoustics of footfall on bamboo decking. Daniel showed up late, threw around buzzwords like holistic harmony and authentic fusion, then left me to turn his abstract ideas into something that could stand upright. 2 months in, I realized he hadn't once opened the design files. I confronted him. Carefully. Hey, Daniel, just checking, do you want to look over the latest model update before the client review next week? He blinked. I trust you. I paused. It's just, if there's a direction you want to shift, or a feature you think needs adjusting. He smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. You've got great instincts. Don't second-guess yourself. This'll be your first big break, right? I remember that moment. I actually felt grateful. Like I was being recognized. He even clapped me on the shoulder, said, "We're going to crush this." What a joke. 2 weeks later, Daniel stood in front of the board, and presented my design. My layouts. My structure. Even the color scheme I'd agonized over for nights on end. His delivery was smooth, confident. He spoke like the ideas had come to him in a dream. Nobody questioned it. When he finished, the room burst into applause. The firm won the pitch. Daniel was promoted. And I was sent back to my desk with a pat on the back and a mumbled, "Great team effort." That night, I stared at my screen long after everyone left. The original sketch, the first napkin doodle I'd made, still sat in my files. My signature was scrawled at the bottom corner. It was the only place my name appeared. And just like that, my belief in poetry died. Architecture wasn't about vision. It was about power. And Daniel Havers had all of it. For 2 weeks after the Kodo pitch, I walked around like a ghost. Nobody saw it, or maybe they did, and just chose to pretend they didn't. I kept showing up, eyes hollow, hands still pushing updates to lesser projects. Cubicles buzzed with energy while I sat in mine like a hollowed-out husk. I'd always believed that hard work meant something. That if you gave enough, eventually you'd be recognized. Daniel had proved me wrong. He strutted around the office like a demigod fresh from Olympus. Every compliment about the Kodo pitch made me nauseous. The worst part? I still wanted to impress him. Still wanted his approval. Some part of me kept thinking he'd admit what he did. That he'd pull me into a private room, close the blinds, and say, "You deserve the credit." I had to do what I had to do. "But you were brilliant." But all I got was a nod and a "nice work on the texture mapping." That's when I realized, there wouldn't be an apology. There wouldn't be justice. Not unless I made it. I started staying later. Not to work. Just to watch. I observed how files were shared, who had access to what. I noted the usernames that logged into project folders after hours, Daniel's included. I saw how passwords were shared carelessly between desks, how senior staff stored credentials in unlocked drawers. Everyone thought our sleek office was secure, but beneath the glass walls and expensive furniture, the firm's infrastructure was paper-thin. That was the moment it happened. A shift. I stopped being angry. I started being curious. In my final semester of grad school, I'd taken an elective in digital systems architecture. Boring on the surface, but buried in those lectures was the idea that buildings weren't just physical anymore. They were code, data, patterns. And patterns could be rewritten. I started researching cybersecurity in secret. It began with blogs, then PDFs, then forums where anonymous handles traded knowledge like currency. It was intoxicating, understanding the logic behind digital locks and knowing, for the first time, that I could break them. Every evening, I taught myself more. Hashes. Salts. Exploits. Privilege escalation. It was like rediscovering architecture, except this time I wasn't building things for someone else to steal. One night, after a particularly long binge of online study, I sat in bed and realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I no longer wanted Daniel to apologize. I wanted him exposed. I wanted his career to be as hollow as the credit he stole. Over the next 6 months, I laid the groundwork. I made myself invisible at work, still punctual, still competent, but forgettable. I let Daniel think I'd moved on. I stopped asking questions in meetings. Stopped staying late. Instead, I built a private server. Compartmentalized every document. Air-gapped my backups. Every trace of my digital fingerprints from the Kodo pitch, every timestamp, metadata tag, draft revision, I archived. Then I quit. 2 weeks notice, casual exit. Smiles, handshakes, we'll miss you. Daniel didn't even look up from his phone during my farewell cupcakes. Perfect. Outside, it was pouring rain. I stood on the sidewalk with my little cardboard box of desk items, a half-dead succulent, a pen mug, and a photo of me grinning like an idiot at my first desk. I threw the photo in the trash on the corner and walked away. I wasn't a simple architect anymore. I was the architect of consequences. A month before I left Kessler and Day, I overheard something that sealed it for me, that this wasn't a one-time theft. Daniel wasn't just opportunistic. He was systemic. It was late, one of those awkward office evenings where only the interns and overworked juniors linger. I had stayed late not for work, but to test the new backdoor script I'd embedded in the server logs. That's when I heard voices in the print room. Daniel's voice, and a nervous laugh that clearly belonged to Kyle, one of the new interns. Just send me the files, Kyle, Daniel said, calm, breezy. You'll get credit in the final package. I was gonna ask Michelle to look over it first. It's still rough. Daniel's tone didn't change, but something in it sharpened. Don't overthink. Michelle's not presenting. I am. And rough drafts? That's how concepts start. There was a pause. Then the unmistakable sound of an insecure kid caving under pressure. Okay. Yeah. I'll email them tonight. That's the spirit, Daniel said. A second later, oh, and Kyle? Yeah. Don't mention this to anyone. It'll look like you're trying to cut around the chain of command. Kyle mumbled something inaudible. Probably, okay. When Daniel left the room, I stayed hidden behind the printer alcove and watched him scroll through his phone, smirking like he'd just ordered takeout, not hijacked someone's future. That week, I saw another intern's model appear in a proposal deck, slightly altered, freshly rebranded, and with Daniel's initials in the file name. Another time, he publicly humiliated a junior designer during a meeting for not grasping modern elevation logic, even though her work was almost identical to the concept sketches Daniel had just approved, the same ones he later plagiarized for a trade show exhibit. And then there was the intern whose idea won a quiet in-house competition for a community garden pavilion, only for Daniel to suddenly claim it as a team collaboration in front of visiting clients. That intern quit a week later. No one replaced her. By then, Daniel was more than just a thief. He was a virus in the firm's bloodstream. His charm covered everything, but underneath, he was rotting out the next generation. That was the final puzzle piece. The thing that turned my quiet revenge plan into something righteous. He wasn't just a liar. He was a wrecking ball wearing a designer suit. There's a specific kind of rage that doesn't burn, it calcifies. Becomes bone deep. You stop shaking. You stop yelling. You start planning. I had left Kessler and Day behind, at least on paper. But mentally, I was still inside those glass walls, hearing Daniel's voice echo across meeting rooms, seeing his smile in industry magazines. He was everywhere. A golden boy held aloft on the shoulders of people whose names no one ever remembered. I needed to fix that. I created Civic Ghost as a small idea, a blog, a whisper, a controlled burn in a world built on appearance. The architecture community is small, incestuous. Names get around. So I started there. A few posts. Anonymous observations about ethical theft in design. Case studies. No accusations. Just questions. Who really designs what? Who gets the credit, and who gets left behind? It wasn't just Daniel I was exposing. It was his type. But Daniel was the proof. The centerpiece. The example too grotesque to ignore. I released the first entry on a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Theft in thin lines, when vision is stolen. It opened with a single image, a design sketch. My sketch. Dated. Signed. Metadata intact. Below it, a slide from the Kodo pitch, identical in layout, in concept, even in flaw. My original mistake in proportioning, mirrored exactly. Not even cleaned up. The post dissected how the sketch became a pitch, and how the name attached to the final work wasn't mine. It included meeting times, proposal timestamps, server logs. Not hacking. Not speculation. Just evidence. The kind that sits in open folders when no one thinks you're worth watching. It ended with a question: how much vision does it take to hit, copy, and paste your name over someone else's legacy? Within 6 hours, it had 10,000 reads. By the next day, it was viral in every university design program on the East Coast. Professors shared it in lectures. Interns whispered about it in Slack threads. The firm wasn't named directly. But Daniel's identity wasn't hard to figure out. A handful of alumni connected the dots, and then, it was public. A hashtag started trending, #CreditYourCreators. But I wasn't done. The second post came 3 days later, this time breaking down how Daniel had mentored 2 interns into silence while presenting their models as his own. It included screenshots, eerily identical drafts, and even a congratulatory message Daniel had sent himself from a dummy email, meant to be from a client. Then the third post, a timeline of proposals and the names quietly erased from them. No embellishment. No slander. Just truth. And the truth was enough. I watched it unfold from the outside like a silent spectator. The online forums lit up. A faculty member at Daniel's alma mater released a statement on academic ethics. Someone filed a formal complaint with the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. The comments under the firm's LinkedIn page went from praise to pointed questions. I got an email from one of the interns I'd written about, Kyle. His subject line said, "I thought no one noticed." He ended his message with a single sentence. Thank you for burning the mask off his face. Still, Daniel hadn't responded. Not publicly. Not yet. The man always knew how to stay calm in the eye of the storm. He was probably in some PR war room, plotting spin. But for once, he wasn't the one controlling the narrative. This time, the story was mine. And I was just getting started. Daniel didn't respond right away, and that was his first mistake. For a week, he stayed silent while the storm gathered online. While forums debated ethics in design, while alumni distanced themselves, while faculty members issued careful, academic condemnations of plagiarism-adjacent professional misconduct. Still, no statement. No apology. Nothing. Because Daniel didn't do apologies. He waited for praise to return like it always had before. But it didn't. Instead, it got worse. Civic Ghost released its 4th post, The Silence Between the Lines. This one wasn't about files. It was about people. Quotes from former interns. Anonymous confessions from junior staffers. One described how Daniel offered to mentor her only if she agreed not to share her drafts with anyone else. Another said he was told to shut up and be useful when asking for proper credit. Each story added to the picture, not of a misunderstood genius, but of a predator in a tailored suit. By now, Daniel's name was being whispered in the industry not as a prodigy, but as a problem. The stages of his collapse started slowly, like watching a skyscraper develop invisible cracks. Denial came first. He laughed it off at lunch with colleagues, according to someone still inside the firm. Some loser blog with a vendetta, he'd said, smiling like he hadn't just been disinvited from a guest lecture at Columbia. It'll pass. It didn't. Anger hit next. An industry podcast aired an episode titled, Who Owns Design?, featuring an anonymous whistleblower. Daniel listened to it in his office with the door open, and 20 minutes in, hurled his thermos into the wall so hard the lid snapped clean off. He called a team meeting the next day. Not to address the accusations. Not to listen. But to shout. You think I got here by stealing? You think any of you would have jobs without me? He yelled, pacing the room while staff avoided eye contact. People like me make firms. People like you maintain them. One brave intern, a girl who barely spoke above a whisper normally, asked if he'd ever read Civic Ghost. Just read it. Daniel laughed, a short, bitter exhale. I don't read trash written by cowards. The girl never came back after that meeting. Bargaining followed. Behind closed doors, he sent emails to former interns, trying to clarify the past. Tried to reframe the stolen designs as collaborative spirit, offered to write belated recommendations, suggested maybe public misperception was the real issue. One of those interns forwarded me the message. His exact words. If we show a united front, we can put this behind us. The media loves a redemption arc. Redemption arc. He still thought this was a script, a character he could tweak for audience sympathy. But the only arc Daniel had left was downward. Depression set in after the firm placed him on administrative leave. Which was a dressed-up way of saying, go home and don't come back until people forget you exist. He didn't go home. He booked a week at an expensive hotel downtown. Then started making calls. Lots of them. Trying to salvage speaking gigs, interviews, influence. Some calls were answered with apologies, others with silence. The week after, I heard he showed up at a small industry mixer and was politely asked to leave. He stayed just long enough to make a toast no one clapped for. A colleague sent me a blurry photo, Daniel standing alone at the bar, eyes sunken, hair a little disheveled, the perfect smile finally missing. And finally, acceptance. But not the kind that redeems a man. It came in the form of resignation. The official kind. A single email sent to staff from the firm's partners. No comment. No explanation. Just a line. Effective immediately, Daniel Havers is no longer employed at Kessler & Day. I read it 3 times. Then again, out loud, just to hear it spoken. The skyscraper had finally crumbled. And underneath the polished steel, all that remained was dust. The news of Daniel's resignation spread fast. The firm issued no public comment, but the silence said enough. People whispered. Clients quietly cancelled contracts. A few publications speculated on the cause, none used his name directly, but the words, ethics scandal, floated between the lines like smoke after a fire. I didn't celebrate. Not right away. The point of revenge isn't to dance on the ashes. It's to rebuild what was buried underneath. So I turned my attention back to the one thing Daniel could never fake, the work. 3 weeks after his resignation, I got a message from a name I hadn't seen in years, Hiroshi Takeda, lead coordinator for the international eco-resort Daniel had stolen from me in the first place. Kodo. He wrote. We came across your blog. Didn't realize you were the mind behind that early-stage sketch. We'd like to talk. The call lasted 47 minutes. Takeda told me the firm had reconsidered their contract with Kessler & Day after the controversy, not publicly, of course, but internally. They wanted new eyes on the design. A new voice. And they wanted mine. I spent 3 sleepless nights rebuilding the pitch from scratch. Not the version Daniel had polished for his audience. Mine. Raw. Real. Imperfect but honest. And this time, my name was at the top of every slide. 2 months later, I stood at the edge of the project site in Okinawa, wind slicing through my jacket, a blueprint tube under my arm, staring out at the empty land that would soon carry my vision. Not his. Not ours. Mine. The Civic Ghost blog went quiet after that. I never deleted it. Never needed to. It stood as a record, not just of Daniel's downfall, but of how many others had been stepped on along the way. It became something more than I ever intended, a warning. A beacon. A community. Sometimes, people still reach out, interns, junior designers, even partners at small firms, asking if they can share their stories. And I always answer the same way. If it's yours, claim it. 1 year later, the Kodo Resort opened its first wing to global acclaim. A small metal plaque sits near the entrance, embedded in the stonework beside the water feature. It reads. Concept by A.S., Vision in Truth. I didn't ask them to put that there. But they did. And as I stood in front of it, feeling the wind ripple through the bamboo trees I once imagined on a sleepless night 3 years ago, I realized something. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes, it looks like your name in print where it belongs. Sometimes, it sounds like silence where there used to be lies. And sometimes, it feels like laying the last brick of a future no one can take from you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, it helps more than you know. Subscribe and stick around for more true stories with twists, turns, and just the right amount of karma.